Hey guys, I just went ahead and fully completed Stalker 2. It took me about 85 hours to do so, and I played almost the entire game on Veteran, the hardest difficulty. I do want to say my PC specs out the gate here. Normally I don't, but because this game is so extremely intensive and unoptimized, I figure it's probably pretty important to start the review with letting you guys know I am running it on a top 1 to 3% rig. So I have a Ryzen 7 7800 X3D, an RTX 4070 Ti Super, 64 gigs of DDR5, 6000 megahertz RAM, and the game is on an NVMe M.2 SSD. So I was playing everything on Epic, all the settings maxed out here. I did have DLSS on balanced, and I was using frame generation. So let me give you my pros and my cons, and then my final verdict of this game. And I gotta tell you, man, this is a very difficult game to review because already it's had like 50 gigs of patches. It released in probably one of the worst states I've ever seen a game release in. Truly cyberpunk on console levels, even on my PC. So many performance issues, so many bugs, and we're not talking like little jank anomalies, right, that we all like to joke about. I mean, we're talking about bugs that are completely progress impeding. These are things that stop you from doing entire quests. They stop you from saving an entire town, so you lose an entire town. Cutscenes just entirely not playing or bugging out, so you miss vital information. We're talking very big bugs here. On top of that, the game was littered with terrible balancing issues, economy issues. However, you know, even though I spent like 55 hours of my playtime on that initial launch of the game, we have had many patches now. So I'm going to completely put aside the fact that I was used and abused because I played the majority of my playtime on the vanilla launch. And I'm going to review this from the point of view of the 1.03 patch. So this is after like 50 gigs of patches, fixing, balancing, etc. And yeah, let's get right into it, shall we? So the first pro for me is that visually this game is absolutely beautiful, dude. Especially once you crank up a lot of those settings, the game is gorgeous. Now, I don't really care too much about graphics, I'll be entirely honest. I play 16-bit games and I play games like this that look great. But when it comes to really getting immersed in a world, I do think graphics can play a part. And I think that everything from the lighting and the animations, you know, clearing malfunctions on your weapons to reload on weapons, handling the recoil, all of that really helps lend to the immersion because it just looks so incredibly good. Other than the faces, but I'll get to that in the cons. But overall, this game looks absolutely fantastic, and it sounds great also. The sound design here, in terms of the spooky type of music that you can hear probably in the background of the review right now, and the sounds of the monsters, the music when it picks up, when you're really, you know, in an active combat situation, and the anomalies and just everything in the world, it sounds very, very good. The voice acting in, you know, the standard language, I believe it's Ukrainian, it's very, very good. Much better than the English. The English is very hit or miss. I think Skiff is very well voice acted in English, and everyone else is pretty terrible. And on top of that, like the translation and everything is probably not very good, and the actual voice acting and stuff is definitely not a highlight. But the sound design on all other fronts is great, and if you do play the game in Ukrainian, I do think that that is a plus also. In terms of the gameplay here, this is also a positive for me. This is exactly what I wanted. I played Stalker 1 through 3 and I said, wow, I love the exploration, I love the anomalies, I love the world here, but boy, oh boy, is the gameplay clunky as hell. My gun never shoots where I'm actually aiming. It's so extremely frustrating. Even if you know, get to Call of Pripyat and you start modding out your weapons, once they added that mechanic. I think they actually added it a little bit in Clear Sky as well, but Once you start modding out the weapons, it gets a little bit more accurate, but most of the time, you know, it doesn't even matter how good your aim is. Your gun's not shooting there. And they've fixed that. So this is a massive map. It's no longer, you know, zone based, so you don't have all those load screens. It is a seamless open world, and it is absolutely massive. It's very cool to play through and just explore the world, all the different anomalies, hunt down artifacts, pick up side quests. I think the greatest strength of this game is the exploration and the open world. It reminds me a lot of Dragon's Dogma 2, you know, a game earlier this year regarding that, because I really am not a fan of most open world games. I think that they're just littered with like fetch quests and, you know, shitty collectibles. And I think that just like Dragon's Dogma 2 did, S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 does a fantastic job of immersing you in the world and keeping things entertaining and interesting. And although their A-Life system is broken, which I'll talk about in the cons, I still found the actual world itself, even if it was devoid of a lot of those interactions that I would like to see with NPCs and mutants and stuff, I found that the world itself drew me in. It was very enticing to explore, to get those gear upgrades, to get those blueprints and those artifacts and stuff like that. That core stalker gameplay is there in spades. And now your gun actually shoots where you aim. So it's everything that I wanted in terms of gameplay. I also think the story is incredibly interesting here. There's a lot of different ways that you can branch the story into different directions through your decisions in the narrative. And I think that is really awesome to see. It was my biggest complaint really in Shadow of Chernobyl, and also kind of in Clear Sky, is a lot of the time I was like, man, I wish I could make more decisions. And then Call of Pripyat came along and it really did, you know, crank that up to 11 in terms of the decision making. And this game, if Call of Pripyat cranked it to 11, this one's going to 22, man, because there are so many decisions, so much dialogue in the game, and I love, like I said, not only seeing the, you know, the old areas that I've been through and I've explored and I've seen these settlements in the other 3 Stalker games, but now seeing them and seeing the characters and how they've been impacted over the years and the story involving them. And, you know, I went with the Ward, and I was wondering, hey, are they going to let me do, you know, this crazy stuff that seems, you know, completely counterintuitive to the Stalker series? And they did. And I love the fact that they did. Even though everybody hated me for going with the Ward on stream, I just wanted to see if they would, you know, hold back, if they would stop you from doing some of the things that I was hoping to do. And they don't, man. They let you make the decisions that you want, and I absolutely love that. And I really like the ending of the game also. You know, no spoilers or anything, but I thought that throughout the game, the story did a fantastic job of keeping you engaged. I will say, I don't know how engaged you'll be or how lost you'll be if you are playing this as your very first Stalker game, because all of the world is completely, you know, reused from the other games. And I don't mean that in a bad way. You know, the zone is only so big, and while it is indeed expanding, of course, you're going back to the zone, you're going to be going back to many of those areas, right? So I don't mean that in a bad thing at all, but because you're revisiting so many of these areas and so many of the characters are returning from the past games, I don't know how compelling it's truly going to be for somebody that's brand new to the Stalker universe. I think time will tell with that. But as somebody that played the last 3 Stalker games, I really liked seeing everybody. I really liked being able to make the decisions that I did. And overall, I think that when this game works, it is superb, man. It is absolutely superb. Unfortunately, even after 50 gigs of patches and being on 1.03, the game has a lot of issues actually working. So let's get into that, shall we? Let's get into the cons. There are a lot of bugs in the game. Even after all of these patches, there are still many bugs in the game. I had, I believe, 5 cutscenes that did not play appropriately. Now, apparently, this is exclusive to the Game Pass version of the game, so maybe if you're playing on Steam, you won't have this issue. I'm not sure about on console, but I had like 5 cutscenes where people in my chat were like, oh yeah, this was supposed to happen. You were supposed to see this on the screen. This was supposed to happen in the world or in the sky, or the character was supposed to do this. None of them happened. And that really did jeopardize my experience playing the game. On top of that, I only crashed one time throughout patch 1.0, 1.01, and 1.02. 1.03 was the patch dedicated to fixing crashes, and I crashed more times in that patch in my like 20 hours on 1.03 than I did my 60 plus hours on the previous versions of the game. So I don't really know what the hell they did, but I started crashing a hell of a lot more once I started downloading, 1.03, which is pretty ironic since that was the patch to try and curb a lot of the crashes. So that was a pretty major issue. And then, while they have fixed a lot of the actual progress impeding bugs, which, applause to them for that. Obviously, they shouldn't have been in the game in the first place. And people like me and a lot of people that played the game when it launched, we had an objectively inferior experience because of them. For example, there's a mission where you're supposed to defend a town. And if you don't defend the town and you keep playing the game, eventually you lose that town. That town is a pretty major point in the game because it's not only the most central area in the entire map, but it has a fast travel, it has a stash, it has traders, and it has side quests, and you lose all of that by not doing it. And unfortunately, there was a very major bug where you could not do the quest. It wouldn't let you do it. You'd go up to the door, you'd knock, "Hey guys, I'm here to protect you. I'm here to help." And they would just not open the door. So, unfortunately there was stuff like that where I had my experience, and everybody that got to that point in the game had their experience ruined because of these bugs previously, and they didn't do anything to really remedy that. Unfortunately, I would have loved to see them after they fixed it. I believe it is fixed now, but I would have loved to see them like retroactively go, okay, we'll go ahead and like reactivate this quest for you. But I just, unfortunately, they did not do that. So on top of that, though, even though many of the bugs have been fixed, like I said, the cutscene ones are most definitely still there. I am still seeing reports of optional quests being unable to be turned in. I'm still seeing reports of optional parts of the main quest, which are pretty important. They do give you, some pretty major backstory, many of those being unable to be completed. And then the performance issues, which are a little bit better, but not much better. I have not really seen a major improvement in the performance of the game. And like I said at the beginning, I have like a top 1% rig. Out and about in the world, the performance is largely fine. For the most part, I was at a constant 120 FPS. You get into some of the towns, though, and it tanks. And it still tanks. I just booted it up, started a new game. That's when I, recorded this gameplay. That's why it looks like a fucking E3 playthrough or something, I tried to make it look good for you guys. But, I played through. I got to the first town, Zalicia, which is a major performance hit, and a lot of people's games just straight up crash when they get there if they don't have enough headway on their rig. And no, the performance still tanks. I saw as low as 38 FPS on my rig. So going from 120 out in the open world to 38, oof, that's rough. And that happens in many of the towns. Still, after an emission, there is a major performance hit that still has not been fixed, and I've seen as low as the 20s for FPS. If I go to a town, during an emission, all the NPCs run in the town, and then after the emission, holy hell, the frame rate tanks really hard. There also does still seem to be a little bit of performance degradation the longer you play the game, which is typically indicative of a memory leak. They said that they fixed any memory leak, so I'm not really sure what's going on there, but there does appear to still be performance decreases as you go on. In terms of things that are not bugs or performance related for cons, the English voice acting, like I said, is not great for most of the characters. I do think Skiff is still voice acted well. The Doctor is voice acted well. There's a couple characters that stand out that were voice acted pretty well, but most of them are not very good. The writing in English is not the best. Also, the faces are like kind of like PS3 level for some reason. Like the game looks incredible, but all the NPCs, and this is after, you know, the 3 patches where they said that they improved it. All the NPCs kind of have like Mass Effect Andromeda face. They have these dead fish eyes. You know, the textures and everything on their face are great, but there's seemingly no motion capture or anything, you know, that's actually helping these guys look, I don't know, normal. Like a actual NPCs that you would see in a game of this, you know, of this level. It should be noted. I didn't want to say it earlier in the review, but yes, obviously the devs went through trials and tribulations because of the Russian-Ukraine war when they were making this game. Yes, I recognize that. However, I am not going to count that at all in the review of the game. And here's why. If you are selling a game as a fully finished product, a $60 entirely finished product, the average consumer is not going to care about what is happening to the devs, how many devs there were, what situations they were going through. The average consumer is going to care about, I'm buying this full price game. I worked hard for this $60. Is it going to run? Is it going to work properly? Right? So that's why I'm not even going to consider the Russian-Ukraine war. Now, if you want to consider that and you want to use that, you know, as an excuse, that's totally fair and that's totally fine and I understand. However, I'm reviewing the game, you know, for just an average dude, and I don't think that matters to the average dude when they're making a purchasing decision. I don't think they really care about the type of situation that the devs have went through when they were making the game. So that's why I'm not really talking about it in the review. I didn't talk about it at the beginning, mostly just because I didn't want this video to get flagged by the YouTube algorithm as like a Russia-Ukraine war thing, because they typically scan through the first couple minutes to look for stuff like that. But yes, I'm not talking about that. But it should be noted, you know, it is something worth mentioning at the very least, that a lot of these issues are probably due to that. Overall, my thoughts on S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2 is that when it works extremely well, and it's everything that I wanted out of a modern S.T.A.L.K.E.R game after playing the first 3. Unfortunately, the game is early access. Even after the 3 patches that have come out, which has been over 50 gigabytes of fixes, apparently over 650 fixes, it is still early access. It's still not very optimized. It still suffers from a lot of performance issues, and I'm still seeing reports of people unable to complete various, you know, quests in the game. So for me, I would strongly recommend waiting. I think that if you play the game right now, you're going to have an objectively inferior experience, whereas if you were to just wait 6 months to a year, you will have the best experience. And I do think that because this game is so long, you know, it took me like 85 hours to beat, you don't want to invest 85 hours into a game that, you know, is not going to be an ideal experience. I would strongly recommend waiting to play the game if you're going to purchase it full price and you want a fully finished game. It is on Game Pass, so you can play it through there, but just keep in mind, this is an early access title, even though they're releasing it as full price. For me, I think in the current state of the game, it is a 4 out of 10. I think it is, you know, for me, 5 is average, 4 is below average. I think it is in a below average state due to all the bugs and performance issues. However, I have no doubt that once those are fixed, and the game is in a proper state, it will be, you know, like probably an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10. But I am not able to give the game that score in its current state, unfortunately. But let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear, you know, if you excuse a lot of the behavior and stuff like that that's went on in the game, or because of the situations of the devs, or, you know, maybe you didn't have any bugs. I heard a lot of people saying they're not having any bugs. Boy, oh boy, do I wish I was you guys. But let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate you. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see all of you in the next video or stream Rooney. Bye-bye.